welcome back to my channel. So a little disclaimer before we start the video. I'm filming on my laptop for now because I still haven't figured out the camcorder situation, and my phone is quickly running out of storage and I need that for work related things. So we're gonna film on my laptop until we find something else out. I'm sorry if it's a little grainier than usual, but the rest of the quality should be really comparable. So today's video is all about mental health. A lot of you guys have reached out to me and been like, hey, I really like your mental health videos, or I like how you're so open about your mental health. Could you do more videos like that? And personally, I'm more than happy to. I've also had a lot of people ask why I'm so open about my mental health on social media, and I wanted to just go ahead and answer that question because for me personally, I grew up with mental health disorders. You know, I feel like a lot of people do suffer from mental health disorders at different parts all throughout their life, but I know growing up and not seeing anyone in the media or on YouTube or in the places where I viewed content, not seeing anyone who dealt with those same issues as me was very disheartening and made me feel kind of like, oh, maybe I'm crazy, oh, maybe this isn't normal, you know, all of these different things that can be really detrimental to someone that's struggling, is to feel alone and things like that. So for me, not just for young people that are going through this, but for anyone that's going through mental health problems, I make it a point to talk about it on my channel and on my feed and all of those things because, first of all, it's genuinely who I am. I struggle with mental health issues, it's who I am, so I'm not going to put on this fake persona online of being someone that's neurotypical. I'm not going to do that. Not to mention the fact that personally, from the response that I've gathered from you all and just from my own personal experiences, hearing someone else in your situation is very helpful, and I think that I've been through a lot of mental health things, and I feel as though I'm able to be a sounding board for people that have problems of their own and can kind of, you know, be a medium to break the stigma, talk about it in public, because I know a lot of people are still about mental health, which fair, it can be very scary to talk about because of the stigma, but the more you talk about it, the less scary it gets, and less stigma. You know where we're going with this. What I thought I would start this video with is the top 5 things I wish people knew about borderline personality disorder. I have borderline personality disorder, as I've mentioned in the past, and I have kind of a top 5 things I wish people knew about the disorder that I want to share with you guys, and then the latter part of the video will be me answering your personal mental health Q&A, advice, situations, etc. Lots of you have sent them in to me, and I'm just going to kind of respond to them for the tail end of this video. So, without further ado, my top 5 things I wish people understood about borderline personality disorder / mental illness in general, because some of these are very general. So I'll just go ahead and preface all of this by saying, when I refer to borderline people, I'm referring to a majority, or I'm referring to myself. I will try and dictate between the two, but if I don't, these views are only expressed by me, these experiences are expressed by me. You could have borderline and have a completely different experience, and that's okay, and I want to talk about it, I want to learn more about it, so if you could comment below, that'd be great, but please don't think I'm making sweeping generalizations about people with mental health issues, or with borderline or anything like that. I'm just relaying my personal experiences. So the first thing that I wish people knew about borderline personality disorder is I don't have multiple personalities, but sometimes it may seem that way. It may seem that way sometimes, there's 2 of me. Similar to the way in which people that have bipolar disorder are constantly in swings of mania or depression, mania, depression, mania, depression. A borderline person generally experiences the same sort of mood swings, however, on a more hourly, sometimes daily basis. So a lot of times you can be feeling manic in the morning, depressive in the afternoon, manic in the evening, you know, so it really fluctuates far faster. Your cycles, I know that some bipolar people experience hypercycling, where you cycle really quickly. It's similar to that, except even on a smaller scale. So it may seem like I'm 2 different people in one day, and that's very possible. Another reason that borderline people may often seem borderline people, myself, may seem like they have multiple personalities is because of a phenomenon called switching. It's called several different things, but the most common one I can find that I know it as is switching, which is when a person that struggles with borderline personality disorder quickly changes their opinion of the person in question. For example, I'll just use my cat as an example. So I wake up one morning and I am so in love with Stevie. I'm like, Stevie, you're the sweetest cat on the planet. I love you so much. I hope everything is great with you. I'll pamper her. I'll give her food, treats all day. You know, I love her so much. And then later that day, or the very next morning, or the next week, there's no telling when this could occur, I could lash out at Stevie and be like, Stevie, you're not even that great anyway. Like, you know, and my actual mental image of Stevie would change. I would be like, oh, I don't really even like her that much. She's not great. That's not true. I love you so much. This is just an example. I've never switched on my cat, but I do switch on individuals in my life. Sometimes that has happened. We love Stevie all the time. For example, boyfriends, parents, friends, situations. Switching is very common for borderline folks, and I know especially for me. So that's something, I know sometimes it may seem like there are two polar opposites, like one day I love you and one day I don't want anything to do with you. That happens, and it doesn't mean that I have two personalities, it just means that I'm trying to cope with switching, which is a really hard thing to cope with. The second thing I wish people knew about borderline personality disorder was that I cannot, when I am in a situation where my feelings are hurt, or I'm all riled up, or there's some sort of emotional distress going on, I cannot express my feelings calmly, and I have to learn tactics to cope with that. I'm prone to outburst and then calming down and being able to handle the situation calmly at a later point. But people with borderline, we're not just being a bitch. We're not just for example, if you're in a stressful situation and you just say, oh my god, I've had it, you just unleash for 1 second, then you rein it back in. That happens to everyone, but specifically with borderline folk, it can last a little longer than 1 second, and we're not being bitchy, we're not being cunty, we're not toddlers that don't know how to control our emotions. However, borderline is very akin to some, typically on the borderline spectrum, people have to relearn how to communicate. That's the biggest part of borderline, at least for me, is communication. So it's very frequent that when I'm in an upset situation, I cannot communicate. I'll often shut down, I'll often get very, very angry, very volatile, very, get away from me. And that's just because I generally don't know how, without using tactics that you learn in dialectical behavioral therapy or any sort of therapy or any sort of coping class that you take, you have to learn to employ those tactics in order to be able to communicate calmly and efficiently with someone that you're having a disagreement with or a situation in which things are hard. My life could have been so much easier if I would have learned some of these tactics early in my life. I've burned a lot of bridges with a lot of people that I wish I could mend because of the way that I've handled things in times of emotional distress and just times of regular stress. And so every day I employ my Dear Man. Dear Man is really good for anyone, I think. It's something that's taught in DBT therapy. Dear Man is something that I use when I'm in an emotional state. And it is really it's an acronym that helps you get what you want out of a situation, which is what borderline people usually have a very difficult time communicating. There's an end goal that they really, really want, and they're here, and there's something that lies in between of it, but it is very difficult for a borderline person to connect this, where they're currently at, with where they want to be, and to communicate that to a third party that's involved in this situation. I use Dear Man. I'm going to share Dear Man with you because I think it could be helpful for anyone that struggles with communication at all. So the D in Dear Man stands for describe. And I'm reading this off of a little chart to help, but this is something I use in just about every situation that I need to. Use specific words to describe to the other person what you want, explaining yourself through language as clearly as possible. Leave very little question as to what you want or what you need. Practice clarity with your words. So I think in my case especially, this often gets muddled with like, you know what you want, but you cannot communicate it. You cannot get it out verbally. I know for me, I don't feel as though I'm a very verbal communicator when it comes to my emotions and my needs and desires. So the first step to Dear Man is describe. E, which is next, means express. Don't shy away from being expressive. Part of learning how to effectively communicate while still being intentional and mindful involves using facial expressions, tone of voice, or gestures that capture the content and importance of your request. There is a delicate balance to be struck here. Work towards finding a happy medium of being expressive while maintaining a sense of self-control. This can be tricky for those of us who have a tendency to get lost in or overwhelmed by our emotions. I know personally for myself, it is very difficult for me to separate my emotions from the situation at hand. So I'm one of those people that will be hyperventilating, crying, unable to express my emotions during an episode. Instead of, it will be either that or polarly, it will be a very calm, stoic. Either way, I'm not great at expressing my emotions. I'm not great at verbalizing my emotions, so it can be very difficult to communicate with me during this time. So learning to express your emotions, whether through physical gesture, whether it's through a hug, or whether it's through crying, whether it's through, body language or anything to that effect, is an important part of Dear Man. So make sure you're including that when you're going through a communication trial. The next step is assert. That's what the A stands for. And it means work towards finding your own balance between asserting your needs, so saying exactly what you need to this person, and staying away from aggressiveness. This includes passive aggressiveness. Okay, at me next time, seriously. But be matter of fact as you assert your points. So what you do want to do, you want to assert how you feel. You want to assert what you need, and you want to say to this person, this is how I feel. This is what I need. You don't want to shy away from it and be like, well, if it makes you unhappy, I don't want this. Like, you need to say, this is what I need, this is what I want, without being aggressive to the person that you're speaking to, and without being passive aggressive to the person that you're speaking to. Just simply stating and asserting, look, for myself, this is what I need. Period. Leaving it at that. Reinforce. That's what the R in Dear Man stands for. Be sure that the other person understands exactly why they should be responding to your request. Remind them of whatever positive outcomes would come from this request. Other people want to feel good about complying with requests, not like they're being coerced into meeting your demands. Be careful not to offer rewards that are unrealistic or that can't come true. Be true to your word. I know for me, something I'm going to talk about in a little bit is relationships, but I know it's very difficult, especially for myself, but for others with borderline, not to feel like they're coercing people in their lives to comply with their request. I know very frequently people in my life have been like, yo, I feel like you're coercing me into this. I feel like you're pushing me. And I think that's where reinforcement comes in, is where you need to remind the other person that you're communicating with about the positives of the situation, about why you need the situation, and about what outcomes could come positively for both you and that person should this situation take place. So when describing what you need, it's very important to communicate what you need, to assert what you need, but also to reinforce those assertions and say, hey, remember how, I feel about this? This is what could happen if we take this step. This is how it could affect me. This is how it could affect you, positively and negatively. It's important to reinforce what you need, specifically with positives. The next step is mindfulness. Don't allow distracting thoughts or intense emotions to cloud your thinking. If the other person responds with defensiveness or hostility, which is common, stay on track. Don't allow yourself to engage with the emotional intensity that they are exemplifying. For example, you're interacting with someone and you are having the issue with communication. It's very frequent that you will exhibit strong emotion. You will cry, you will become angry, you will shut down and be very cold. Any of those things can encourage hostility, anger, confusion, frustration from the other party that you're speaking to. This is something that I've had a lot of experience with. you need to stay mindful, stay focused on your goal, stay focused on what you need to communicate to this person. Tell them that you understand why they may be frustrated with you, why you, even if, you maybe don't understand why they're frustrated with you, say, could you clarify to me why you're frustrated with me? Just keeping that line of communication open and staying mindful and not engaging in the fact that they're yelling, not engaging in the fact that they're crying, not engaging in the fact that they're saying frustrating things to you. This is one of the most difficult steps, in my opinion, because for someone that has trouble verbally expressing their emotions, it's very common to rely on feeding off of other people's emotions. So, what you need to try and do is stay on track with what it is you're asking for or speaking about. If you respond to the other person with your own defensiveness or aggressiveness, which I do all the time, it's something I'm working on, your efforts will probably be sabotaged and you will not get what you're asking for, at least not in the long term. Rather than responding with intensity, practice opposite action, radical acceptance, and mindful breathing. Maintain your focus. So those things mean opposite action. If this person is coming at you with anger, intensity, hatred, frustration, it's important that you stop and come at them with an opposite action. Say, I understand, like I was speaking about earlier. Come at them with gentleness if they're feeling aggressive. That's important. The next part of Dear Man is appear confident. So that's important. Even if you're not feeling very confident in your request, even if you have trouble believing in the validity of your request, you need to appear confident. People, if you go into it feeling unconfident, people will feed off of that and also feel unconfident with your request. Imagine yourself as competent, confident, and deserving of what you want or need, because you are. You are confident in some aspect of your life. You are a competent, functional human being, and you are deserving of what you want or what you need. All of those things are true. You just need to remind yourself of it and keep those things in mind as you're communicating with someone. When you take yourself seriously, others are more likely to do as well. Practice self-validation on your own to cultivate this skill. I think a lot of people with borderline actively struggle with self-validation, actively struggle with validation problems, so I think making sure you're feeling confident and validated before you enter an argument space, or while you're in an argument space or in a communication space that's a little bit troubled, is very, very important. The last part of Dear Man is negotiate. This is a really difficult one for a lot of people, borderline or not. When our ideal requests are not met, there is often a way to meet halfway to find a solution that is good enough for both parties without compromise either party's values. A big part of negotiation is about respecting other people's limits, what they need. It's not just about you. That's a big thing to learn, especially for me, and hearing that the other person also has needs, also has things that they need from this situation, and learning to compromise and negotiate the two of you, your needs together, and to form one solution is really, really important to active, good communication between two people. When the other person believes that you're capable of negotiating, when they see that you can negotiate with them effectively, they're much more likely to see you as a very reasonable person capable of negotiating. A positive consequence of this is that you're more likely to have successful interactions with this person in the future. As you can see, Dear Man is super helpful, super amazing. I use it in as much as I can remember. It's very difficult sometimes in the very heat of the moment of an argument situation or a conflict situation, but that set of principles really guides me to where I need to be as far as communication is concerned. The next thing that I want people to know about borderline is relationships are hard. Really hard. It depends on the individual, but I know for myself, being in a romantic relationship with someone is very, very difficult when you have borderline personality, especially in my experiences, because you need so much from this person, but you're unable to communicate your needs, your desires, and the way in which you need them to be present for you. And sometimes that can be very overwhelming for a partner, as it has proven to be in several of my last relationships. I do also believe that in my experiences, I'm not speaking for all borderline people here, but in my experiences, there tends to walk a line of emotional abuse on my end, of me abusing my partner emotionally, not maliciously or not intentionally, but causing very stressful and upsetting and difficult situations for my partner, because I am unable to learn how to communicate and rule my emotions well, and it often ends up impacting them. So just know, if you are someone with borderline, it is totally possible to have a very understanding and communicative relationship. I'm not saying relationships are a bust. You just have to work extra hard in your relationships to make sure they're what you and your partner need. Referring back to Dear Man, it is not all about you, and negotiation is a huge part of being in a relationship with someone with borderline. If you are in a relationship with someone with borderline, or you think you may be in a relationship with someone with borderline, the best thing I can tell you is that it's hard for them. Recognize that. It's hard for you. I know that too. Recognize that. And try and be a force of stability in their life, because stability is something that's often really lacking in borderline situations. The next thing that I want people to know about borderline is we are not untreatable. I think there was a long time going around the medical community that borderline is untreatable, completely untreatable. If you have borderline, you're fucked, basically. But there is no medication for borderline personality. For example, cancer is treated with chemotherapy. A headache is treated with Advil, ibuprofen, whatever you prefer. Borderline personality disorder does not have a specific medication that coincides with treating the disorder, which is unfortunate. However, borderline personality symptoms can be alleviated by other mental health medications. For example, I take Zoloft and I take a sleeping medication. Those things treat symptoms of major depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, actions, self-harm, etc. Those things treat those symptoms. Those medications treat those. It does not treat my borderline personality disorder. Treating borderline and overcoming borderline is really learned through action, through doing, and through improving communication skills through therapy of sorts. Dialectical behavioral therapy is the recommended therapy type for people with borderline personality. It's a skills-based therapy in which you learn basically skills like Dear Man's, other communication skills that you really, really need in order to reacclimate yourself to communication. The last thing that I want people to know about people with borderline, or about myself and my borderline situation, is the best gift you can give someone with borderline, or with any mental illness for that matter, this goes across the board, is patience and understanding. People that are dealing with mental illness, until you have dealt with mental illness yourself, you cannot fathom the effects that it could have on a person. My biggest piece of advice, if you know someone in your life that's dealing with mental health, which I guarantee that you do, diagnosed or not, show them compassion, show them understanding, and show them patience, because they're trying, they're working on it, I promise. And if they're not, maybe you can guide them toward that direction gently, in a friendly way. In addition to being empathetic, willing to learn how to communicate with a person with mental health, you should also not belittle them. I know that kind of goes without saying. You're like, yeah, why would I belittle them? But also, thinking they're incapable of certain tasks simply because they're facing a mental health crisis without asking them is patronizing and not a great thing to do. For example, I'm still very successful. I'm still myself. It's just an added burden that gets in the way sometimes. All in all, we have a lot of love to give, and we're just looking for someone who is willing to learn how to communicate with us and to be empathetic to our situations. So that's the 5 things I want you to know about mental health and borderline personality, especially relating to my situations.